All right, welcome back to the show. Hope everybody's doing well. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I found this clip circling the net. Have a look at it.
Is it that Gen Z, because you're all on your phones, you don't get out anyway?
Yeah, and who put together the algorithms that got us addicted? I would argue it's the older generation, and they're now failing to take responsibility for what they've done. We're not the ones who designed social media algorithms more addictive than casinos.
We've got some of the best parks in the world in London. Why can't you use
Thank
those?
God. My depression's cured.
Oh.
Because he's got a park.
That's probably got dog poo in it that's not been picked up. I mean, seriously, is your solution to this crisis amongst Gen Z's mental health to build more parks? You don't think there's a crisis?
And I made a reaction video to it, which I posted on my short form channels, Instagram and TikTok. This has got to be one of the hardest watches on the net this week. Have a look at this.
Is it that Gen Z, because you're all on your phones, you don't get out anyway?
Yeah, and who put together the algorithms that got us addicted? I would argue it's the older generation, and they're now failing to take responsibility for what they've done. We're not the ones who designed social media algorithms more addictive than casinos.
See, this is why I make videos about how I'm ashamed to be a part of my generation. 1.4 million likes. And this is also why old people in the older generations don't like us young people. Because of bullshit like this. Boo-hoo, wah, mummy, I can't get my ass off scrolling because some evil man made an algorithm that forced me to sit in bed all day and forced me to be a lazy hedonist. Let's watch on.
We've got some of the best parks in the world in London. Why can't you use
Thank
those?
God. My depression's cured.
Because he's got a park.
That's probably got dog poo in it that's not been picked up. I mean, seriously, is your solution to this crisis amongst Gen Z's mental health?
This is genuinely an insufferable watch. Gen Z mental health crisis. No, Gen lazy. Okay, let me wrap up this video with one simple point. There isn't a generation in human history that wasn't in some way, shape or form victim to systemic indoctrination, government exploitation and tyrannical attempts to control the minds of the masses for power and whatever else. However, what separates Gen Z, the young people of today, is that we are the first generation who want to make the claim that we have it too hard because nobody could possibly understand how difficult we have it, and that's why we have a mental health crisis. Bullshit. When you put as much effort into getting your life in order as you do to your fashion and hairstyle, that's when your life will improve. And that's not an ad hominem argument. It's a genuine observation about priorities. And it's extremely indicative of why the older generations don't like us. Because we pick, and I say we to represent the generation overall, we pick and choose when we want to put effort and when we don't. We're the most fashionable, trend-following, visually and aesthetically pristine generation I have seen. But if you have all of those in place, when everything around you is falling apart, as you describe it to be, it indicates a serious lack of priorities and character. Everything about our generation is performative and external, and most conversation about what they have at heart isn't rooted in true empathy. It's also to seem empathetic, because emotional clips like these, with fake empathy that touch the hearts of the people who are suffering, go viral, and it gets you clicks and your personal brand benefits. But something the older generations can see is that this isn't empathy. It's an illusion, a mask he basks in and advertises as empathy, all to avoid taking responsibility over his habits, his life, and tells you that you are just as much of a victim as him. Now, most of my life revolves around helping people overcome what they've been victim to, working out their next step, and reassigning a meaning to the experience so they can perceive their life with gratitude rather than a bitter resentment towards something far too many people know to be extremely unfair. And there's a proportionate amount of compassion that comes with the grave suffering many of the people I work with and even know have seen. Scrolling social media is not one of them. So Elliot wasn't happy with this and he invited me onto his show. So we booked a date in and had a chat. Now, rather than just leaving it to play for you guys, because you can just do that on his channel, I'll be watching it through with you and I'm going to give some commentary during and throughout and give some of my thoughts as it plays on, because it was an interesting experience to say the least. So let's just get into that. The first few minutes kind of went on. We had some general conversation. I'm going to skip that. It was only 7 to 8 minutes, and then he played his original video and he played my reaction to it, and then this conversation is what precedes that. So we'll just start from here because it's more relevant to what I'm going to be going through in this video.
How do you feel looking back on that now? Is there anything you changed in the way you delivered that reel? Nothing?
No.
All right, well, let's start off. What is a lazy hedonist?
Should we be specific? Is that in reference to what I said?
Yeah.
But
So
I
you
didn't say that.
You called me a lazy hedonist.
No, I didn't.
No.
You didn't?
No.
Should you watch it again?
Yeah. No, I've got the exact comment. The comment was, boo-hoo, wow, mummy, I can't get my ass off scrolling because some evil man made an algorithm that forced me to sit in bed all day and forced me to be a lazy hedonist.
It's lazy hedonist being someone who sits in bed all day. So I don't know why would we dispute whether or not somebody who sits and lies in bed all day is a lazy hedonist.
Yeah. Characteristic. It's an acceptance of a state of being. Lazy hedonism is just an over-obsession with pleasures, of which there are more than there have ever been in modern history. I think we can both agree on that. Lists of things that we can jump to just not have to stare into the eyes of our problems.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
it wasn't
the laziness implies a negative spin. So just for clarity, I'm not a lazy hedonist.
Sure, fine. But if you don't get off your phone and sit there and doom scroll for hours and complain that it's someone else's fault that you're doing that, does that not fall under the category of laziness?
Well, you tell me based on your definition. I feel like we don't have a tight definition here. So lazy
That was the first sort of example of a diversion tactic. I pitched the question, which simply served to justify my usage of the phrase lazy hedonist, which categorically wasn't an ad hominem argument. So I just asked him if he agrees that, hypothetically speaking, somebody who scrolls for hours and then blames that failure on somebody else must fall under the category of lazy. Simple yes or no question. I don't know why we would disagree on that. Elliot actually talks about how he's built multiple businesses off the ground, so he's a successful entrepreneur. So there must be some standard of work ethic underneath. I basically wanted a confirmation, essentially, that scrolling for hours isn't something one should do, as I imagine he doesn't as a successful entrepreneur, so that we can construct a message for young people to do with their lives exactly as we have done. And I think as an entrepreneur, there's no chance on earth he could disagree with that statement, which is why I find the position that he's coming from quite hypocritical and unfinished, so to speak. We'll get into it much more, but it's audacious, first and foremost, to profit from social media and then complain about it as one of the most addictive impositions of the modern day, thanks to the older generations who fed it to them. And it's also disingenuous because if he were to admit that it is lazy to scroll for hours and blame it on somebody else, then his standpoint should lie in agreement to what I said in the reaction clip on TikTok. I don't know why we disagreed on that, but let's watch on.
hedonist would be someone who doom scrolls for hours on their phone.
Yeah, sure. And it goes against his ability to not put it down. That's the core distinction to make. So we need to clarify, right? A lazy hedonist isn't someone who just scrolls. It's someone who just scrolls and doesn't get off the scrolling and then blames the fact that they have to stay on scrolling on someone else. And then the scrolling is just an example of a myriad of things that fall under the modern society's sort of options of things we can turn to, as I said, to run away from our problems. Scrolling, fast food delivery companies. What else? Processed food. There's more of it than ever. Porn online. There's more of a hypersexualized culture than ever. It's like lists and lists and lists of instant gratification. And I agree with you that it's been imposed on us. I agree. But the
So here's some. I'm gonna keep stopping it every time. Sorry, something comes to mind for me to comment on. Here's some of my first thoughts in retrospect to the conversation on his show. Looking back, I think we prepared for this conversation very differently. I went in to share my views, extend on the reaction video that I made, as a person interested in teaching self-improvement. And then I started to feel sort of pin me down debate tactics being used. I felt the dynamic, well, it confused me, and ended up caught between trying to elaborate on a point, defensively hoping to be able to get to the end of it to clear my case of being a horrible person that doesn't have compassion or understanding for people's difficulties, and dealing with pin me down avoidance tactics being used to get clip moments, take them out of context, and gain an egotistical dopamine hit, while smearing the actual purpose of the conversation, which is what is the best advice to give to a young person dealing with the social media culture of our modern life. It was weird. Watch on.
ability to get off is in the mind of the individual consuming. You're either powerful or you're powerless. It's a binary law of life. It's one or the other. So you either listen to
You don't
someone
think there's more nuance? You're
between
either
being
powerful,
able
powerless?
to put... No. You either have the power in yourself or you give it to someone else. That's a choice in the moment. You either give the power, in your case, I imagine what you're suggesting is that we look to the governments and for systems to intervene to suggest a social media ban? Maybe.
Not necessarily.
Okay, fair enough. But it has to be one or the other. So either you give the power to the person, you give the accountability to the mind of the consumer, or you give it to someone else. There's no in between.
I would say what a lot of these conversations lack is the nuance of the difference between responsibility and blame. And oftentimes the two get confused. So responsibility is not necessarily equivalent to blame. Just because someone is responsible for something, it doesn't mean you can blame them. So the perfect example would be,
I wouldn't say that we were talking about responsibility and blame when I was describing power and not having power. It's more of an emphasis on wanting to be an individual who has a choice and wanting to be an individual who admits that he can't make certain choices. And I'm sure you can come up with examples where there is nuance between being powerful and not having power. We need systems, we need organization, we need societal order, of course, except my comments were specifically referring to an individual behind a phone, where they are powerful or powerless. You either put the phone down, in which case you are powerful, or you ask someone to come along and help you put the phone down, not necessarily the productive kind of help, which comes in the form of support from a community or friends and family to help you with life's difficulties, but someone who comes along indirectly, changes what you have on the phone, and, well, because you couldn't put it down on your own. So someone had to come along and mutate the problem into something manageable.
it doesn't mean you can blame them. So the perfect blame, just because someone is responsible for something, it doesn't mean you can blame them. So the perfect example would be you're out walking and a drunk driver hits you and breaks your leg. Sure. That is not your fault. Sure. Objectively, you could.
I find it interesting how we went from can you put the phone down when you're scrolling to somebody who gets hit by a car. It's a completely valid point on the topic of victimhood and taking responsibility, but it's like I said, we moved away from that specific instance of being a powerful individual who can put the phone down and not be subject to their addictions, or being a powerless individual who just has to sit there and scroll. So it's another sort of a diversion from what I was saying there, and also what I was referring to in the original reaction video. See, if on the Jeremy Vine show, the discussion topic that Elliot was on was about involuntary suffering and people's great difficulties in their life, quite obviously I wouldn't have come guns blazing the way I did in the reaction video. But the topic was doom scrolling. And we moved away from that, and you'll see as it goes on, we got lost in all sorts of statistics around suicide rates and housing prices and employment rates that involves a far greater range of factors to take into account. Let's continue.
Have avoided it, even if you were Superman and had crazy reflexes.
Right. Voluntary and involuntary suffering.
Involuntary suffering has been imposed on you. Mm-hmm. It is your responsibility to make sure that you do the adequate slow steps, walking through in a cast, to improve your ability to walk and eventually get back to normal, right? That's is your responsibility.
Right.
And if you lie in bed whining about your broken leg, refusing treatment of walking and physios, whatever else, that is your fault. It's your responsibility to put yourself in a better position.
Completely agree.
The blame is not on you there. The blame is on the driver. They gave you the broken leg.
Sure, but what does it give you to blame the person? The point is you still need to take action. So after that, after you've decided whatever you're going to do with that experience, the choice is in your hands what you're going to do. I don't even disagree with you that we have all these various different impositions. I don't. I told you at the beginning of the thing. That
I should have...
no, sorry, I said it.
Paused there, because that was an important distinction to make between accepting and assigning a blame, which of course is necessary, like he said, to have understanding, to have awareness, and to recognize the cause of the problem. But once you have that cause, that's it. It's done. It doesn't serve you anymore. So I would have been curious to hear his thoughts further on that point. Let's listen on.
In the video, that this is no new era, that we have a wave of attempts from the powers that be, however you define that, to control the minds of the masses. We agree on that, right?
What do you mean? This isn't a new era?
It's nothing new. That governments attempt to take control of the minds of the masses. We can look at the education system. Do you not agree?
I think what we're facing is pretty...
Would you not say, let's just stick to social media then, would you not say that social media and... Correct me if I'm wrong, your standpoint is that social media is an imposed addictive part of people's life.
I would say social media is something that was handed to us by a select few individuals in the older generations who are world-class programmers stolen from casinos, gambling sites to addict you and get you hooked. People like Mark Zuckerberg ultimately have knowingly poisoned and corrupted our society with social media. Social media is a new phenomenon. It hasn't been around very long. It's been around, what, 20 years. This is a unique era of technological advancement that has never been seen before. That's why there are so many problems, is because this is a novel thing. It plays on old things that have existed as long as time, like being...
I don't really agree on the standpoint that social media was doom and gloom from the beginning. And this is interesting because even in one of my previous episodes of my talk show, I literally discuss how the algorithms of short form platforms were based off the psychology that keeps people hooked on the slot machines in casinos. So I'm completely aware of the hypnotic design behind them, except social media... His subtle implication behind this was that social media inherently has to lead to doom and destruction, which I don't agree with, because there's a lot of positives that came off social media, including short-form platforms. In fact, I might even argue that the majority of the destruction that came off social media, that didn't have to be 100% of it, as I said, the majority of that destruction was a result of human failure, individual failure behind the phone, rather than some core nefarious agenda at the bottom of it to get people addicted. That's not to say I'm dismissing how addictive it is, but there are countless people. There must be a substantial percentage of social media users who are not addicts, which would suggest that it is possible. And if it's possible for a substantial percentage, it's possible for a vast majority. And if it's possible for a vast majority, then you alleviate the majority of the problems he's describing. I would like to see those statistics. How many people would actually consider themselves addicted? Interesting stuff.
Old things that have existed as long as time, like being insecure of your body, especially as a young girl, for example. But it exacerbates those problems in a unique way that has never been seen before.
And so what's your message to young people then? Because I make self-improvement content. I say you either can or you can't. What's your message?
So our common ground here is that we want to help our generation, right?
Yeah. So what's your message to them? How to improve?
My message is that you need to take responsibility for what's next in your life. How does that look?
How does taking responsibility look?
Well, first of all, you need to be aware of the problems facing you. So, for example, if you don't know that it was a drunk driver that hit you for some reason, you're going to be pointing fingers and you're not going to be sure why you broke your leg. Similarly, if you don't know that there are people poisoning your mind with social media algorithms in the news, which you would agree with me on, you're not going to be able to ultimately stand up and fight against it. I think all of this advice of just put down your phone ignores the fundamental tenet of modern life, which is that we are socially connected online, digitally. That is the big flip that's been seen. Now, reality...
That doesn't have to mean that we need to doom scroll. Just because we're socially... This is the fine line in between that he misses, that it consistently invalidates his core point, which is that just because we are socially connected, and you'll see the various points he makes after this, is that, you know, technology and screens are even being implemented into the education system, so you can't avoid it. It doesn't mean you have to be an addict.
Reality is a reflection of social media rather than social media being a reflection of reality. Everything is on the online world, including our schoolwork from when we were in COVID, which has been increasingly put to us on screens rather than the real life. Everything is guiding us towards screens, which fuel addiction. They lose social connection, all these important fundamental tenets of being a human, right? So I think the first thing is you need to work out what's going wrong, which we're doing in this conversation. And then you do need to take responsibility. I'm not one to say you should just curl up in bed and ignore everything that you could do with your life. You have to take responsibility. But
which is my only message.
It's not your only message, though.
It is my only message that you can either put the phone down or continue.
Let's keep on going. Lazy.
You still didn't give me
I would have liked to hear, actually, what is my other message then, aside from taking responsibility? Because this is interesting. I am a self-improvement creator. My only message is, hi, hello, this is my channels. Maybe you have a scrolling addiction. Maybe you've observed some things about modern society and you found my videos and they resonate with you because I analyze them on a deeper level and I explain things that you've observed in a better way, so it helps your understanding and therefore helps how you're going to improve on your life. I don't know what is my message beyond take responsibility of your issues. So I should have asked for that. I'm curious, really curious. Maybe he would have told me that my message is insulting people. But again, we come back to the sort of yes, I did, no, I didn't, about whether or not I called him a lazy hedonist. Regardless, it's really interesting what happened here, actually, is that...
A piece...
Hang on, let me play it again.
This is my only message.
It's not your only message, though.
It is my only message that you can either
All right,
put
well,
the phone down or continue.
Let's keep on going. Jen Lazy.
You still didn't give me a piece of advice that you would give.
He tried to divert it again after that whole elaboration that I don't even disagree with. We still didn't get an answer as to how taking responsibility of your doom scrolling habits actually looks. How does that look? What does taking responsibility encompass in one's life? And I could have played debate tactics and pushed him onto a yes or no question as to whether or not somebody can simply put their phone down or not. I didn't. I reverted back into this conversational dynamic. I let him host out of respect because it was his show, but I didn't feel a return of that good faith. So just watch on.
For the young generation. See, this is the difference between me and you. I'm willing to sit on social media and be everyone's enemy and tell them, yes, you've had all this stuff imposed on you. Yes, we are victims. Yes, your minds are trying to be poisoned, as you said. Yes, you are having a long list of addictive things and you're being guided in a direction of life where you are subject to these addictions. Drugs have been around for years. Alcohol has been around for years. What's your message to that beyond awareness? Awareness can be established. What's beyond that? Because I say, and I'm an enemy when I say it, is that it's in your power to put the phone down. Press the lock button, go down. That's why the lady said in the video that we got...
So I'm pretty clear about what I suggest for people. Basically, all I'm looking for is, okay, if you disagree with me, what's your suggestion? Because I just say, cool, you are addicted to social media, you can press the lock button and put the phone down. He disagrees. So basically, I just want to know, how does it then look if he disagrees?
In your power to put the phone down. Press the lock button, go down. That's why the lady said in the video that we got beautiful parks. Not because that's a reasonable or very not great argument to your point, but she's making a point that the park represents an alternative choice than doom scrolling because it exists, right? And
right, so the lady gave her suggestion from the Jeremy Vine show. She said she believes that someone should go to the park. This is basically what I'm asking. So I'm saying, I believe you can press the lock button, put it down. The lady says you can just go to the park. That's her idea of a solution. I'm literally asking, what's his idea of a solution then? And we're not getting it.
I find those sort of solutions from older generations very reductive, and
it is a pretty useless thing to tell someone. I agree. Although it's nice and I'm all for it. Go for a walk, go for a run in the park. But if you're dealing with someone who's at rock bottom in their life, it doesn't really help. It's a typical sort of response from someone who doesn't understand the requirements of uprooting someone's life that doesn't look the way they would like it to.
Well, they're a bit pointless and silly, but the core point is that you need to be able to, as a young person, divert your focus from looking at what you are a victim to, because you will only find a long list of stuff. From that onto how can I out with the old, in with the new for some...
And this is interesting as well, actually. I'm going to try and reduce the frequency of interruptions, but this is interesting what I said here, and I think I could have elaborated on this a little more. When we talk about this awareness that Elliot's encouraging and looking at what's being imposed on us and what people are victims to, which I haven't argued with at all, I've completely agreed with him that it's tough for young people. But if we analyze that and actually think about the mind of a person who is trying to improve their life, if you encourage them to have awareness for social media beyond once they've understood what are the potential damages of social media, if you tell them to keep at least a percentage of their mindset focused on the awareness of the damages of social media. Social media isn't the only thing being imposed on them. And so if you encourage them into this mentality, they will find themselves in the trap of constantly recognizing things they're a victim to. I don't believe awareness of everything you're a victim to is important. After a while, you should just learn from basic experiences and various things that have been imposed on you how to maintain yourself as an individual who is in control of his actions. So we can sort of have awareness about the potential damages of social media. We can have awareness about the potential damages of our hypersexualized culture. And we can have awareness about, let's say, the education system as a third example, about how it trains you into being a worker, not a thinker. Once you're aware of just those three random examples, after that, I don't know how necessary it is to find awareness of every single other problem being imposed on you, because there's hundreds of them. We only have a certain amount of real estate in our mind. And if you occupy it with the, let's say, 1,500 things being imposed on you, difficulties of life, because you'll have your own unique individual problems as well. You have your house problems, your family problems, your relationship problems. If you're occupying 0.5% to 200 things, 100% of your mental real estate is taken up. So I think once you've got a rough awareness of the problems around you, a select few problems, the focus has to be on how can I become a better individual who is more competent at handling life as a whole, rather than seeking out awareness of all these different issues everywhere. You become a problem seeker, regardless of if you at the core believe you should take responsibility. Because this conversation is strangely swaying side to side from specifically discussing doom scrolling to then discussing the various things imposed on young people and what makes this younger generation's life so difficult these days. And then when that's not convenient for the argument, it goes back to being specific about doom scrolling. But then what we should actually be doing is looking at how an individual improves overall, because that's what I do. I make self-improvement content. So for one person who comes to me to work with me and improve their life, social media might not even be an issue. For another person, it might. The point is, the message will be very similar to both of those. After a general awareness of what's going wrong in your life and what you're doing wrong as an individual, there is only steps forward how to become a more powerful individual who understands he is in charge of every single one of his choices. That would have been nice to elaborate on that a little better here. Let's watch on.
In some sort of purpose, whether that's a business, whether it's a passion project, whether it's trying to do something for your loved ones, people around you, right? And this is actually extremely, extremely important in relation to social media for the younger generations. The reason I'm so critical on them is not because I'm an evil, horrible person who wants to tell everyone how useless they are and just label everyone as a hedonist. That's why I made the distinction as to why I used the phrase lazy hedonist in the video, because it's a state of being that you fall into if you do not divert from recognizing your victimhood to taking responsibility. The focus has to be on something new, because you will only find shit. And if it isn't social media, it's something else, right? And if it isn't imposed from the governments, it will be something in your personal life. But if you train yourself to be a victim and to wallow in how life is unfair, life is tough, man.
Yeah, I don't think people are wallowing though by just recognizing difficult impositions.
Yes, they are. This is very important to recognize.
I get lost in doom scrolling from time to time. I would say,
so do I.
It's my.
So I think what happened there, to be fair, I didn't entirely correctly reply to his point. Overall, he actually wasn't denying the importance of taking responsibility. I did reply as if he was. So that was a mistake on my part. But what I did is I resorted to elaborating on my point rather than sending back questions for clarification, which was necessary there.
Yes, they are. This is very important to recognize.
I get lost in doom scrolling from time to time. I would say,
so do I.
It's my responsibility. Oh, so you're a lazy hedonist?
No, that's not what I said. Be careful, because when I scroll, I'm not addicted to social media. I'm not the one standing out here complaining that I have an addiction. I'll have a flick through social media, man.
We can watch social media without being addicted. Short form platforms where content creators can create fantastic careers can exist without a chunk of the population becoming addicts. It's possible. I am living proof of it, and I keep repeating to him throughout this episode that I'm not somebody special. All I'm basically saying is, hey, I did this so you can too.
Social media is useful for many things. Awareness, like you said, education, connecting to your friends. Why not? Doesn't mean you have to be addicted, sorry. It doesn't mean that. So I can scroll, get off, and take responsibility over my life. Everyone can do that. I'm nothing special. And you shouldn't really disagree with that, because then what you're telling young people is essentially you're just doomed. That's your core message, and I'm
yeah, you're telling at least a percentage of them that they're doomed.
Trying to get
that's not my core message. My core message is that you have to take responsibility, and we have to make the best out of a bad situation.
How does that look?
What do you want? Do you want self-improvement advice?
What's your advice to a young person who struggles with a scrolling addiction, for example?
Okay,
what do you tell them? It cannot be anything but lock and put the phone.
I interrupted him there. That wasn't good from my part. Should have let him
down. You just, for some reason, refuse to say that.
Do you think that's working?
Well, of course it's not, because the message is that you're a victim and you have to wallow and complain about social media. And yeah, let's get the.
Do I think that's working? I don't think it's being done.
governments to come along with a social media ban, maybe an AI integration into our phone devices down the years to monitor people.
You only have to take a little trip down to the local cafe or to a restaurant and you'll see parents just sticking iPads and screens into a 2-year-old's face so that they can have a peaceful conversation or a peaceful meal, just to not have to deal with the parental tasks at hand. That's how they get addicted. When they don't have a bloody clue what they're doing, you just stick it in front of them. Yeah, sure, they'll be 15 with an addiction. So again, it's powerful or powerless to the individual, regardless of whether he's 12, 18, or 45 with a kid. You want to give the power to the person in charge of the screen. Except to that, he would have just told me, oh, and how old is that parent? And then he would have just blamed it on the older generations again.
Screen time, which they'll sell to you as safety and the governments to come along with a social media ban, maybe an
I didn't
AI.
hear this part. What was this?
Well, of course it's not, because the message is that you're a victim and you have to wallow and complain about social media. And yeah, let's get the governments to come along with a social media ban, maybe an AI integration into our phone devices down the years to monitor people's screen time, which they'll sell to you as safety and security to help the youth, where will actually be just for surveillance, policing the internet, which neither of you want.
Well, I think it'd be helpful to clarify here. So the suicide rate for 10 to 14-year-olds
into suicide rates. We still did not get a description of how taking responsibility of your scrolling habits looks. Oh, it's frustrating to watch. In the core example of the original video that I reacted to, taking responsibility of scrolling, and let's say, which I don't even entirely agree with, but let's say taking responsibility of your externally imposed social media addictions must look like putting your phone down more often, replacing scrolling time with more productive habits, exactly like the person he exemplified who gets hit by the car. Maybe for him it's nutritional habits to thin the blood, improve circulation and accelerate healing. Maybe it's physio work. Maybe it's reaching out to other people who have had similar injuries and connecting to them. That's a way of establishing community and human connection. And additionally, beyond that, with your action, with that active taking responsibility, giving your experience a meaning by creating a new reality that could have only been possible as a result of what happened to you, to the point where you're almost grateful it happened to you because you wouldn't have gone on and achieved XYZ, whatever that is, or met certain people, let's say, rather than holding on to a bitter resentment and an upset of how you were simply unlucky to have been there, no matter how true that may be, because you cannot change the past. But we didn't get into that, which is frustrating to watch back.
In 2012 to 2019 went up by 138%, 10 to 14-year-old girls.
Yeah.
For middle-aged white men in America, it went up by 3%.
Yeah.
Is that the girls' fault? Should they have just put down their phones?
I can add some statistics to that. One third, because you have to look what comes into that. But no, I completely agree. I'm going to add to your point.
But is that their fault? Is that the girls' fault exclusively?
I haven't denied victimhood. This whole time, I've admitted that we are victims. The response is the key point. So we need to look in the household of a daughter, for example, that you've given, the example of a daughter, and ask why she fell into suicidal inclination to even go in that. You cannot surely be sitting here and saying it's all because of the phones. That's not what I'm saying. So there's other things that need to be taken into account.
Sure.
It's not what you're saying, but it's been our entire discussion so far, from which we pivoted into suicide rates. It's a strange one.
Right. So let's look at them. Degrees. 1/3 of university graduates more than 5 years after graduation are employed in non-graduate roles.
See, because I'm literally agreeing with his point. I mean, funnily enough, I talk all the time about how difficult it is for young people today. What I don't do is add that extra part of making out like it's much harder today than for the previous generations, or imply that the previous generations had it easier and that it's their fault. It's those extra bits that I don't add on top. Now, there's a core question here that didn't get answered underneath as to what his advice is for a young person. To just take responsibility is a very broad thing to say, almost as if it was a box tick necessary to say, only because nobody can deny that. But still, an accurate answer as to how that might look wasn't delivered. The reason being, the only existing answer of how one takes responsibility over their scrolling addictions is that they must put the phone down. Nothing else exists. Perhaps it's once a day to start off with if you're someone who considers yourself extremely addicted. Then perhaps averaging 1 hour less screen time per week. And with 6 months of commitment, a person in charge of their actions as the owner of their life. That's how it happens.
debt, time, weight.
Also, I don't know why he asked me if I think it's the girl's fault that she felt suicidal. He sort of dared me into saying yes, which is strange. But if by fault you mean that you have 100% agency over all of your thoughts and actions, which is how you must be in order to pull yourself out of suicidal states, then yes, if somebody finds themselves in a state of deep depression, they equally have the power to pull themselves out. Why would you want to tell somebody anything else? Which is my entire point, that she can get herself out of the rut. And as a self-improvement creator, not a political activist nor a preacher for systemic reform, my advice is that the only way she can do this is by giving herself full power over her actions that cumulatively install self-belief inside her. Now, what you'll see from here on in the conversation is that it became, I remember this now, it became a bit of a battle of the egos. And I started to assume a very defensive position and started to battle him, so to speak, with ego. And I do take full responsibility of my contribution to that, as I would hope that he did too. We both definitely did it, which I think ultimately underneath resided in his frustration, believing that I called him a lazy hedonist, which I didn't. But I was quite confused as to whether we were sitting on a topic that we vastly agree on to continue conversation, which we do, or we're trying to get pin you down moments and earn the got you moments to post on short form platforms. The very short form platforms, we're literally discussing how addictive they are, by the way. So that's an interesting one. Or beneath all of that, do we just fundamentally dislike each other because I believe his outlook leaves the door open for tyrants to come in and provide solutions for which an individual could have provided themselves a solution by building and realizing the power they have as a human being. And he just thinks I'm an arsehole who called him a lazy hedonist. I'm not sure. Regardless, as both a viewer now and also a participant in the conversation, I do feel like the conversation did not have a core goal underneath to get to a formative solution. I don't think that was there. So let's listen on.
House prices paid by first-time buyers were 16 times higher in 2022 than 1982. The average deposit required jumped from 25% of annual earnings to 115%, right? These are catastrophic realities of life.
Sure.
Watch here. This is where he got his first got you moment. Watch this. So you'll see it. Well done. Good job. From a perspective of debating and emotionally satisfying his audience, to whom I'm subjectively an adversary, that job was really well done. So well played for that. It got him a ton of clicks, followers, traction on his show, and likes and views on the very platforms he says are the reason for global addictions. I'll let it play out. You can watch me get cooked, and then I'll give some thoughts afterwards. This is how, let me put it back 5 seconds so you can listen to how it played out. So let's see.
Annual earnings to 115%, right? These are catastrophic realities of life.
Sure.
Every generation had their difficulty. We're the first generation in modern history that wasn't taken out of our lives at the age of 18 and sent off to war.
That's not true. In the last 200 years, only 2 generations across a 33-year time span have been conscripted, which is what you're talking about. World War I and World War II.
You're talking specifically about older generations.
Imagine never brushing your retainer again. Just water and the touch of a button. Outdated...
Right?
No, let's just get this straight.
Your 4 points was
so
the older
generations in the last at least 200 years have been sent to war at 18. So that's factually incorrect.
No, I'm talking about your point. You didn't listen to what I said. Your
you
original
said
point
we're the
was
only
that the
point in modern
generation...
history, and I've watched your content. You've said that we're the only generation in modern history that at 18 haven't been plucked out and conscripted, sent to war, right? That's factually incorrect.
Fine, but were we sent off to war?
So I didn't get a response. So this is very, very interesting to watch back. I didn't get a response to my statement that every generation had its difficulties, which is a key point. Social media is the difficulty of today. War was just an example I gave of a difficulty of the past. Fine. Poorly delivered, factually corrected, well done, Elliot. But the reason I brought it up wasn't to get into the semantics about the age of the humans who were and weren't sent off to war, though I admit that was maybe the implication of my statement. The point I was trying to make underneath was that it's an important thing to recognize and account for in the overall discussion of how difficult life gets. That these generations these days, however they are called, did not have to go to war. And so their difficulty is objectively far lesser than that of somebody who did. And that point didn't get responded to.
It was the older generations that you complained about who have given you the algorithm sent off to war.
Did I say they were sent off to war?
Well, I said they were.
Yeah. And
so what I'm saying is to appreciate...
2 generations in the last 200 years have been sent out.
I stopped short there. As I said, he beat me in this factual statistical debate. But as somebody who claims to be interested in the improvement of young people, what got him one of his highest viewed reels wasn't something, clips from this conversation, wasn't something that helps them improve. It is yet again another viral clip about how young people don't have it easier and how the older generations didn't have it harder. Ultimately, another claim rooted in victimhood. So what he proved is that I brought a statistically incorrect fact. As I said, well done. But my question about a generation who went to war, regardless of when this was, didn't get addressed. What I wanted to say here, regardless of the precise number of generations it's been since war, was that the older generation's perspective of us, of young people, of Gen Z, comes from a standpoint of, we want you to appreciate your life a little more because you didn't have to go to war. That's all. I don't know why one would argue with that, but it is quite indicative of the real goal underneath the conversation. I'm trying to instill gratitude, respect, accountability, and he's desperately trying to find material to prove that young people have it rough, which I didn't even dispute.
We can gloss over that point.
But just because
you also said in the video
then Gen X and millennial,
we're Gen lazy.
So I don't know the labels of the generations. So as I said, we completely bypassed the actual point. But that's fine. I mean, I can say for myself, and I hope my audience stands with me on this, is that I'm at least proud to be a young person who doesn't watch that clip and go, yeah, see, I told you, we aren't the only ones who didn't go to war, so we aren't ungrateful. My scrolling is because of something else, not ungratefulness. Like, just disregarding the appreciation for the fact that we don't have to go to war and that life could get harder, and maybe we could just see the light. Just see the light of that.
Just because
you also said in the video
then Gen X and millennial,
we're Gen lazy.
Yeah, so he moves on. He moves on because he knows he's got his clip. It's fascinating. Love it.
Yeah.
What was that about? You kind of dismissed the mental health crisis that I was talking about. Do you think there is a mental health crisis in Gen Z?
Sure. I already gave you a statistic for that.
Yeah. So where do the housing prices, the unemployment, the lower rungs of the career ladder being pulled up come from? Is that because of us?
You are focused on victimhood. This is my core point.
Mad.
You keep circling away from the point that I've made. Don't interrupt me. Let me get to the end of my sentence.
He started one of his reels off with that.
I admit that people are victims, and I like to point out victimhood. This is my core point. You keep circling away from the point that I've made. Don't interrupt me. Let me get to the end of my sentence. I admit that people are victims, and I guess I'll have to repeat this another 20 times throughout this podcast. People are victims. I just gave you a list of statistics that literally back up your point. I have no fear or denial of admitting that young people are victims.
Of who?
Well, a long list of
who?
Of impositions.
It's the old people's fault again.
Where do those impositions come from?
Systems, past generations' failure.
Past generations.
Oh, so see what I'm saying? So
it's crazy. I couldn't believe it.
What's your advice to a young person? Oh, the old people screwed you over, so you can't do anything about it.
That's not what I've ever said.
What it is.
The first
because
step
the
is
mental health crisis.
Wrong.
Let me bring it back to that point.
And then you take
about the young
responsibility
girl.
and do your
I'm
best.
not going to get interrupted again. About the young girl who was, what did you say, between 10 and 14, the suicide rates are up, right? You need to look at the household as a whole.
Absolutely.
Right. So you look at what they're being taught. You look at what they're being taught in school, right? How they're being educated about mental health.
Who teaches them in school?
You are crazy.
I couldn't believe it. If you're at home, it's your parents' fault. If you're in school, it's the teacher's fault. If you're just living your life, it's the government's fault. It's madness. Madness.
This is hilarious.
Do you want to answer?
So it's, oh yeah, sure, no problem. I haven't got a problem answering anything.
I was so shocked.
Your response to a 14-year-old girl who falls down the line of feeling suicidal is it's someone else's fault. That's it.
I would say she has...
You still haven't told me what taking responsibility means. I haven't denied any of your points. You refuse to tell me how taking responsibility
Taking responsibility means taking the cards that you've been dealt and trying to maximize your life outcomes from them.
Right.
But what do they actually do? maximize your life outcomes? How does one maximize the outcome of their life? See, I interrupted him again here, which I shouldn't have done. I'm freaking worked up with the avoidance strategies. How does taking responsibility look? So let me give an example. I don't know. Let's say I have a video gaming addiction, right? His mind would automatically go to who designed the video games. What was the goal behind designing video games and giving that to young people? Perhaps looking inside the video games, why there's so much violence and why gun games and fighting games were given to young people. Whereas I'm saying, if you want to get over your addiction to video games, you have to start counting how many hours you're on video games for and start reducing that number by putting the controller down more often. It literally cannot get more specific. All I'm asking him for is, how does taking responsibility of scrolling look since the beginning of the show, or now being a young person? Now we've gone general. It's like, how does taking responsibility of the difficulties of modern life look for a young person? What do they do? What do they do tomorrow? I can give them a 15-step procedure on what they should do from tomorrow morning. And we get into that in a second. But he just wouldn't give it.
Because life is tough. Life is hard. Man,
But
my
I would
grandmother
say that
was
those
7...
10
Let me tell you why I call Gen Z lazy. My grandmother was 7 years old when she was taken out into the street. And if you came from where I come from, you'd have the exact same standpoint. She was taken out into the street at the age of 7, and she was forced to watch Nazis publicly assassinate a long list of soldiers from whichever army that was.
It's horrible.
Right. Her whole life she spent in poverty, slaving away at a factory, all with a guy who was beating her entire life, a violent husband, right? She never complained once. She was a victim. She saw terrible suffering. She got out of the sofa from a chronic...
She didn't need additional awareness about why she's suffering. She could have looked to the communist government at the time. She could have had all the awareness in the world about why her life looked the way it did. It would not serve her 0.001%. All it was, how do I put bread on the table for my kids tomorrow morning? How do I make sure that they have clothes for school? How do I get through the next day of life? That's it. No awareness, no asking for aid, just do or do not. Simple.
Backache from multiple herniated discs at the age of 60, 70 because she couldn't afford to pay for the surgery just to give me a tram ticket so that I wouldn't have to walk wherever else.
I didn't describe that properly. When I said give me a tram ticket, I meant to go to the drawer and get out like 50p's worth of kunas, which is the Croatian currency, just to give me those 5 kunas, 50p, so I can go and get a tram ticket so I wouldn't have to walk, hobbling across the kitchen. How, you guys tell me, how can I watch that? How can I see that and feel sorry for someone lying in bed with a perfect spine and complaining about an older person giving them an algorithm that forced them to be on their phones and be upset that someone has a better body than? How? Teach me.
Going when I'd visit her once a year.
That's
incredible. Beautiful. Right.
Yeah.
That is... Yes, I was a victim. Yes, life is hard. Let's encourage people to take responsibility of their lives and be strong. Do you know how to build strength?
Again, I moved away from the topic, which is frustrating to watch myself. He asked me, why do I find Gen Z lazy? So that the conclusive statement to be made there was because proportionately, according to what I've seen and what probably a lot of his parents and grandparents have seen, the phone addiction that he's talking about is so terrible, is utterly minuscule in comparison.
You build strength by refusing victimhood. The opposite of slavery is not freedom, it's personal responsibility. And slavery is metaphorical. It refers to everything being imposed on us, right? Personal responsibility that starts by, for those at the bottom of the bottom, so the 14-year-old girl that you gave the example of earlier on, it may start from a simple shower in the morning. It may start from doing her bed because those core activities are so difficult. So I will sit here and say, yes, you know, by the way, let me establish, I'm a very compassionate person, extremely empathetic. And I think that a lot of your
started defending myself here.
Opinion revolves from fake empathy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how it seems.
Why does it seem that way?
Well, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. So let me get to the end of my point.
No, that's really important. If you're going to come on here and say I have fake empathy, no, let's cover this now because there's loads of tangents.
It's very important that I look at that 14-year-old girl and then bring it back round to you and the general message that you provide. I don't want to make it an ad hominem. I'm sure you're empathetic, but let's say what your message, what people can take from your message. So let's look at that 14-year-old girl, someone at the bottom of mental health, of suffering, of experiencing difficulty. For someone like her, it may be an encouragement of trying to take a shower.
Why is she suffering, I think, is the first thing to point out.
Again, victim mentality. Why is she suffering? No. How do you get out of the suffering?
Do you discourage her from trying to do bed? You refuse. Every time I start telling you what people can do, you interrupt me.
Okay, I agree.
No, don't interrupt me. I'm going to finish that
Make your bed. Keep on going.
Oh, you don't think it's good that people would make their bed? You just ridicule Jordan Peterson's advice about encouraging people to...
I'm a huge fan of Jordan Peterson. I love
so let me continue my point.
She's a good friend, and Jordan Peterson's changed my life, including his advice to make your bed. Do you want to finish your point?
Perfect. Yes, I do. So that 14-year-old...
Oh, he's smug, isn't he?
...girl can either be encouraged... Well, no, she can only be encouraged to do her bed.
And see, just on that note, I'm going to let it play out in a second. Again, he won. Very, very calm and composed. I'm getting worked up there. He won, but not in the pursuit of truth, in emotional management. So, well done for that. Again, performative goals. The clips will be fantastic. Looking good, looking calm, emotional management. These are all important skills, but still not providing a solution for a suicidal young girl, which is literally what I do for a living. So, and when I look at it from that perspective, actually, the only reason I'm sat there in that studio is because he got upset that he thought I called him a lazy hedonist, which I didn't. I don't know why he'd be upset. All I do is sit online and tell people how to improve their lives, and I get hundreds of messages daily from people informing me that I have pulled them, or they've pulled themselves with my advice out of that very suicide he's telling me. This debate is so broken, super egotistical, both sides.
To take a shower, to clean her room, to maybe start looking beyond the household, wherever her suffering is, right? You need to give them that opportunity. You need to encourage them to divert their focus off what they are victims to onto something brighter in the future. If you refuse to do that, this is the fake empathy part, because the only reason you wouldn't encourage someone to do that is because in yourself, you need to justify what you failed to overcome by telling people that they can't either. So it's almost an illusion that you mask yourself with to encourage people that they are victims to focus on hyper-awareness of what they're victim to, instead of telling them, hey, life's difficult. There's a ton of shit coming down the line, like my grandmother, right? What about a boxer? That's another great example.
Well, could I respond to that first?
Yeah, he's right. I should have stopped there. But what I said there is very important. There is only one reason underneath as to why someone wouldn't like a message of looking forward and only looking forward and only trying to improve your life and only trying to take responsibility of your habits and advocating for this extensive awareness over what you're victim to. And that is because at the core, there's a percentage of you that simply cannot uproot those very habits from your own life. Because if you were to be honest and call someone else out, you would need to listen to that message to yourself.
Sure, 60 to 80% of professional boxers go through domestic violence, absent parents, general broken households, right? And yet they get to the top of their careers. How does a professional boxer's day look? There's a chapter in my book called We Are All a Stage Performer. Why would you not give that advice to a young girl? Why would you not tell a young girl who's going through terrible times to treat herself like a stage performer, like a boxer, who's going to go out to the world despite what he's been through, despite what she's been through, and conquer her suffering, that she can get up, that she can do her bed, that she can go to the gym, that she can take a cold shower, she can start eating healthier, she can budget and move away from fast food delivery services and scrolling and try and cook a meal, maybe learn some skills.
Have you seen all my content? Have you been following me for a while?
I just saw you blame the older generations on young people's scrolling addictions, and you refuse to say that what they need to do is put the phone down. That's the core of this argument.
So you haven't seen all of my content where I tell people that they need to take responsibility.
And you refuse to answer my question as well.
What's
I
your
asked
question?
you, why wouldn't you tell a young girl to treat her life like a boxer, a professional boxer?
And also refuse to answer me as to whether or not somebody can put a phone down.
who stands as a metaphor for someone who just refuses to back down.
I respect what you're getting at. And to be frank, in my content, I do. I say you need to self-impose difficult tasks onto your life, because then you'll be prepared for the difficult tasks that emerge from random interactions with the world, right? I say that. I talk about the making your bed analysis of Jordan Peterson and how great it is.
You know what's another thing? Is you actually only really properly understand that nobody is coming to save you, that you're the only one who has to take 100% accountability of your life, 100% of your choices, when you get fucked over really badly, and then you're like, oh shit, all that awareness, all that preparation actually still didn't even help me. I just need to be my own boss against this life, and hopefully I'll get blessed with some good people in my life who will support me along that way.
Very literal as well.
Yes, you literally need to make your bed.
Right.
But what I'm interested in, because I don't have fake empathy and I don't make content shouting slogans, is I'm interested in the highest needle movers for Gen Z. That's what my entire podcast is. I ditched a 6-figure salary doing the job I loved in the media space to go after this because I think it's neat. I could right now do a million other jobs that I've been offered that would pay more, that would be less effort, and would be, frankly, way more fun at times. But I choose to do this. Now, of course, there's a selfish element of me enjoying this too and feeling fulfilled from it. I'm interested, and I'm sure it's the same for you or any content creator. I'm interested in the highest needle movers for our generation. What ultimately takes us towards flourishing? I look at why that girl is suffering. That's an important question. Why is she actually suffering? What would you say?
I think the more important question is how to stop suffering.
Okay, but I think
that is of higher importance.
My analysis is you have to examine why she's suffering to answer the how.
Would you not say you've done the job in helping her understand why? Would you not say we've done this job? It's all over the media. Everyone knows how terrible scrolling is.
Again, I should have stopped there.
But we know nothing's being done about it. So there's not an awareness problem. There's an
because they want systems to come in and do it for them. It's shirking the responsibility. It's relying on external reliance. The closer you get to external reliance, the more you move away from personal accountability.
Can I ask you something really direct that will help both of us find common ground here?
At this point, I didn't even know what was the point of this.
We're trying to have a productive conversation here and help young people, because we both agree that those stats are awful, right? About our generation as a whole. What's a bigger needle mover?
I don't actually believe that was the true goal behind the conversation from either parties, particularly as we went on. I really don't. I think it was a moral high ground that I suppose he felt comfortable assuming, because by this point he had his got you moments. I don't believe it was his aim behind the conversation to help young people. And the 3 or 4 reels that he chose from the entire podcast are testament to this. If his goal was to help people, right, meaning how to achieve a higher reach to young people, I think he got like 2.5 to 3 million views overall on his reels, whereas the long form got about 5k views at the time that this was filmed. If he wanted to help young people, he would have put the advice from throughout the podcast that helps young people, except he put moments where I looked like I was like, he got me, he cornered me. And I don't know why he would want to do that to someone who is so successfully helping young people on a daily basis. Well, I do. And that is that the most traction he gets is from validating people into being comfortable with their experiences and understanding and what they've been victim to, and having awareness to that. So he delivers himself as this compassionate, kind, empathetic person who ridicules the demon who came along and just told you that he doesn't understand your suffering. Why would you take 4 clips from an entire conversation, the very conversation you claim is rooted in helping young people, only take the 4 clips where that person who helps young people every day looks like a mug? In those clips, he makes that person look like a mug. He's trying to help young people. He's got someone who helps young people and takes clips out of a conversation with that guy who's helping young people and frames it and takes it out of context in a way that makes him look like a mug to young people. That's the fake empathy. That's the point I'm making. It's hypocrisy. I'm not interested in taking clips out of this where I think I got him on certain moments. I don't care. I think the only couple of clips I remember I'm going to get from this is near the end, where I was talking about the importance of avoiding systemic intervention, because they come along and they tell you that they're going to help you with helping young people's social media addictions and all the rest of it. And in turn, they put bans and narrative controllings and infringements on freedom of speech online, all under the guise of helping young people. So anyway, so those couple of moments I remember off the top of my head, I'm probably going to clip. I have no interest in making him look like a mug. Even in the original video that I put out, the reaction video, I had no interest in framing him in a bad light. I was merely taking his advice and saying how terrible it is if you want to try and help a young person to listen to this kind of advice, because it's rooted in victimhood. All of this whole thing was nothing but pure projection and frustration with someone you thought called you a lazy hedonist. I don't even believe he believes that I called him a lazy hedonist either. I think he turned it into that because that sentence is quite muddy. I think he turned it into that because that's what allowed him to get his egotistical dopamine hits of taking those clips out of context, posting them on his page, and that's what gets him views and followers and likes and traction on the very platforms he complains about as being culpable for the most devastation that young people have experienced since I don't know when. How hypocritical.
A suicidal girl to make her bed, or banning the content on TikTok that gives her body dysmorphia and makes her hate herself. What do you think is a bigger needle move of helping young girls there?
He cuts inside, he goes for it! Go!
Heaven, I'm in. Now there's nuance required. That's not binary. The options you just gave me.
Okay, but out of those two, there would be a bigger needle mover. If there's more nuance,
See,
then
this
please
is
fill me in.
interesting because I would argue that the very same systems that you're asking to impose the ban are the ones propagating this hypersexualized culture. So you're asking for a solution from the very people who created the problem in the first place.
And that's the problem. That's why it's so tough.
Right. And what's the answer?
So we've eliminated one of those options. That's it. It's the equation was solved there and then. He said, what's the higher needle mover for our generation? Which he pitched me two options, either the individual or we come along with a content ban to censor and prevent girls from having to get body dysmorphia or whatever he said. No, we cannot ask the same people who provided the problem for a solution. Therefore, that option is eliminated. It's on the consumer. Equation was solved.
Take personal responsibility because life is tough. Another evil man is coming in 10 years. And if you're not prepared for it, he will destroy you. We haven't even got started with what's down the pipeline. AI is around the corner. So unless you tell that 14-year-old girl that she can get over her problems and she can learn to do her bed. And by the way, in 6 months' time, she's doing much more than just her bed. So it sounds stupid when we just keep repeating.
It doesn't sound stupid. It doesn't sound stupid.
So the focus, this is the key point. The focus must be on how to overcome your difficulty once you have the awareness. Once the awareness is there, it's done. We've established how addictive social medias are.
Yeah.
We've established how the mainstream media poisons people's mind. That key point of the people you are looking for systemic intervention from are the very people who created the problem in the first place. So
Yes.
nobody is coming to help you.
That's what's so tough. But I don't think the no one is coming to help you message is necessarily helpful. So what
We
would
can
be
help
cool?
each other.
Yeah. So what would your prescription be?
No, wait, don't move on. You don't think that's a helpful message?
That we can help each other?
No, that nobody's coming to save you. Because it encourages people to give themselves power, powerful or powerless.
Yeah,
one
I mean,
or the other.
It also encourages this lone wolf mentality that there have been various studies on. I suppose
We glossed over two key points just there. Actually, this conversation is all over the place, and you can see it in the comments on his YouTube video. It's very, very, very weird. Very unlike most debates you'll see online. Two key points that were glossed over just there. Number one, the importance of community and people helping you who are local to you. And number two, taking personal responsibility and realizing that you can't ask for a solution from the people who created the problem does not mean you're entirely alone and that you now have to be a lone wolf. Telling yourself nobody's coming to save you doesn't mean you don't want any help and you have to be this lone wolf hustler, I'm all alone guy, whatever. I literally said we have to help each other. But we moved on from discussing the problems of systemic intervention and sort of straw man diverted that into discussions of being a lone wolf.
I spoke to Jamie Grims about this on my podcast, who's an evolutionary psychologist, and how this modern day representation of the lone wolf strategy has been so detrimental to young people. We've been told by crypto hustlers all the time, no one's coming to save you. And look, I accept the premise and I get what it's approaching, but we've taken it too literally. People are there to save you. Humanity is based
We're here
on
for one another.
community. Exactly.
Oh, completely.
So your
You're
neighbors,
not asking for
your
help
family,
from
your
community,
friends,
though. You asked for a social media ban. You said you want a TikTok content ban. You didn't say you want a community.
And by the way, I don't necessarily want a specific content ban. There's more
you've gone back on that now.
No,
so we agree that systemic intervention is not useful.
Systemic intervention is certainly useful. Would you say that the banning of slavery prevented slavery?
What has slavery got to do with this, man?
Sorry, can you take the analogy? Would you say that that systemic intervention limited slavery?
Sure.
Okay, so systemic intervention
Doesn't
can be
mean
helpful.
that all systems come from a beneficent source.
When did I say that?
Well, you suggested it because you
Okay, but I didn't
reduced
say
our
it.
argument about doom scrolling right the way back to slavery to try and corner me and make out like it wasn't good that slavery was stopped.
That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm,
That's
by
exactly
analogy,
what you're trying to
comparing
do.
the systems and banning things
Systems are
systemically.
important.
Yeah.
Systems are important. Communities need to be at the core of them, not broken humans who are connected to everything and nothing and encouraged to wait for a system to come along and give them the solutions.
I'm
to
really
their
keen for
problems.
people
Okay.
watching this now to
Keep
be
interrupting
helped
me.
by
Interrupting me once again, particularly this time on a crucial underlying point, the issue being taking power away from people and giving it to governments. Governments are not the only kinds of systems that we need and the only ways of having order across society. So
your advice. And I want us to find common ground. Like, this whole show is about tangible things for people to cling on to help their lives. So if someone's suffering from social media addiction right now, they're a young Gen Zer, what would your advice be for them to get over it?
Start small. Start telling yourself that you can, not just in the mirror, but through the tiniest actions in your day. It may be as simple as something like hydrating. Try and drink more water.
Especially a new tonic. That'll fucking solve all your problems.
And then a week later, you're doing more than just hydrating. You may be taking cold showers and doing your bed, like we said. And then you might be starting a business. And then you won't have thought about the scrolling. Because this is interesting. I never told people to lock the phone, put it down, and then sit there and grit their teeth and curl up into a ball and resist scrolling social media. No, it has to be, there's a duality of moving from what you're victim to onto moving onto something that you are taking responsibility of and aiming towards.
Absolutely.
So adjust your actions accordingly, right? So take the phone, press the lock button, put it down. Don't stop there. Go and do something instead. That's why I bring it back to that point I made earlier about the parks, right? Not because going for a walk in the park is the cure to all man's suffering, but because it represents an alternative action to something that leaves you victim to what we can all agree is imposed trouble.
There's a piece here on responsibility, and I agree with that. But ultimately, when you're just going to ignore the fundamental systems at play, I think a cold shower can only get you so far.
This is what you miss. Let's take something like OnlyFans. I know, extreme example. I'll get that. Let's take OnlyFans. Why does that industry continue to prosper? Because of the consumers, because of the demand. If every man was given strength and encouragement and somewhat harshly criticized, exactly as I do in my content, whilst sharing empathy to the difficulty that's been imposed on him by a hypersexualized culture. When you establish at least a majority of it, because a complete overhaul will never happen. But if you establish a majority of a generation who are strong enough to say no to their lowest, most impulsive desires, what are animalistic cravings to lust over a girl who doesn't even know you exist.
Could you not just ban the porn?
No, because the lusts still exist. This is the point. The lust still exists. Demand creates a service. There will always be an immoral business provider. Always. Evil lives inside us. I think we can all agree on that. Would you not? Or do you believe that there are purely beneficent individuals who live amongst us?
No, I mean, Alexander Solzhenitsyn says it best. The line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man.
Cool. So we can agree that someone will show up and give an immoral business in service to someone's failure to take accountability, to take personal responsibility over their actions. But instead of focusing on the system that's been imposed on them, that we agree on, that I accept, and that we can give a range of statistics to back up, if you give strength to young men and you remove the lust at the core, or at least the majority of it, the industry wipes itself out. You remove the demand, you remove the consumer, you remove the industry. That's how things have happened. Now, this isn't just a simple choice of someone not feeling lustful in the moment. It's what I told you at the beginning. It's cumulative action that compounds into an individual that eventually is simply someone who is the embodiment of being able to say no. To someone struggling with doom scrolling, they're at the bottom of that scale. I empower people to get to the top of that scale by going through all of these things that we can conquer in our days that are imposed on us in order to become the champion of who is in power of their fingers and hands. For as long as you sit around and say, because I'm all over the sex culture, by the way, porn industry and all over it. I'm sure you've seen my content. I'm all over it because lust is one of the strongest emotions that champions men, I would argue, across society at the moment. If you can conquer that, you'll find a lot of things in life become a lot easier, not because they become easier, but because you become a stronger individual who is simply capable of conquering those things.
And this is interesting as well, just to add, what you'll find is people with porn addictions and people who are regularly subscribing to girls on OnlyFans also tend to have scrolling addictions and also tend to regularly order fast food from fast food delivery services and also tend to do a lot of clubbing and probably also tend to do a lot of drinking and probably also tend to do a lot of drugs, because they all fall under this category of a person who doesn't have self-control, a person who isn't in charge of their choices, of what they do and what they don't. It's not about social media. It's not about the scrolling. It's about an individual who is either in charge of their actions or who isn't. And then from there are two perspectives to look at the issue from. Number one is, why are people being actively forced to be weak, impulsive, and to not have control over their minds, and why we mustn't ask for system. Well, actually, when you answer that question, you find out that it's because people who run our societies and those who sit at the top of the hierarchies, as we've discussed in this podcast, benefit from us being weak because they can keep up power and control. And the second perspective, which is answered with that, is why we can't ask for a solution to all of these things being imposed on us from the governments and systems in place, is because they're the people who created the problem in the first place, and therefore they do not provide us a solution, but rather a plaster to cover the wound that still exists underneath, and even when they come along with a ban or censorship, will manifest in other areas from a new guy who will come along and bring on his own business. Now it's social media. AI will be heavily involved in our near future, which is why I mentioned it a few times throughout. That's a crucial thing to understand underneath all of this.
So my message is, start small, accumulate action, stay consistent. You're a stage performer. You're important. You can win in life no matter what cards are dealt to you. Any message other than that is one that is simply someone basking in their own illusion of the things they don't want to overcome. That is a fact.
And that's the same for any generation. You always have to take responsibility for all of your actions. So what is it that makes Gen Z uniquely lazy to other generations when you say they're Gen lazy?
So I'll start with what they're victims to. I mentioned this earlier. We're certainly the first generation that has an array of things, of options to not need to. And I mean that metaphorically. We've lost the necessity to cook. So to explain, if you take it way back to the cavemen, they needed to be fit. They needed to be strong. They needed to be fast. They needed to be competent, and they needed to be mentally resilient. Why? Because if they weren't, a bear comes around the corner and bites their head off, their family's dead, right? It was necessary. It was do or die. Now, we've traveled in that direction along a spectrum of not needing to. We don't need to anymore because, well, you don't need to cook, I guess, as a silly example, because you can just order a fast food delivery service from a company, right? Or you don't need to get up and go and train because, well, life these days accommodates you in being able to fall into lazy hedonism. Doesn't mean that I'm criticizing everyone and saying everyone's a lazy hedonist and there's nothing beyond that. It's the trap of falling into lazy hedonism. That's the core point.
You've said before, and it's worth getting up the quote just so I don't misquote you here. There's no doubt that the older generations are exceptionally critical of young people, especially the new generation of young people. They say all we want is a permanent holiday, that we just want to scroll, go on our screens, game, complain, whine, moan how bitterly unfair life has been for us. And in 99.9% of cases, I wouldn't even disagree with them.
Yeah, as I've done throughout this whole podcast.
Yeah. It's really helpful to hone in on the 0.01% where you would disagree with them. What is that 0.01% of people where those claims from older people aren't justified?
In what specifically?
Well, you've said that in 99.9% of cases, you wouldn't disagree with them criticizing young people, wanting a permanent holiday, wanting to scroll, game, complain. What would you say the exceptions are?
Well, it's more of a metaphor to represent a majority of times I just think young people. Because, by the way, this is very important to establish. Throughout this conversation, we've given the most extreme versions of suffering. We've given an example of someone who's going through suicide. We've given an example of people who have no parents to turn to and they have to turn to clinics to talk about depression. We've given examples of deep, deep poverty, of suffering. I even gave you examples of war. These are not common things. Sure, the stats are up, but for the majority of people haven't seen suffering like that. Or at least a substantial amount of them. I don't want to get into the semantics of whether it's over 50% or not. A substantial amount of young people are advocating for their addictions to stay in them, not because they have had it so hard that they've been such a victim to their lowest, most impulsive desires. And with that advocacy, they're encouraging the people, and this is why I blame them so much, because they're encouraging people who have seen real suffering, who are more likely to fall to these impulses, because they don't want to uproot those habits themselves. That's the important distinction to make. So a lot of the generation haven't seen great suffering, haven't really got that difficult lives, come from stable backgrounds, know nothing of difficulty and suffering, and yet they sit on the internet and whine about how bitterly unfair life has been. It's coming in hot and hard. If you think scrolling, an addiction imposed to you by some system, is the epitome of life's difficulty, I have the greatest sympathy for you.
You said young people have more of everything than ever. What would you say they have more of now?
A lack of necessity. Options to turn to. Diverted focus from a direction and an aim towards a more virtuous life. Something that is beyond that only serves themselves and their lowest, most impulsive desires, as I told you earlier. Something beyond that. Something for your parents. Something for your friend group. We talk about communities. Do something for them then. Energy circulates. And if you can't get off your phone and put it down, it doesn't matter what you've been through. If you can't press the lock button and try and do something, I always come back to that. If you can't press the lock button, put the phone down, go to a park, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. You also said, and I agree with you, grandparents who had less were able to graduate at 21 without tens of thousands of pounds in debt, have a car parked outside, have a mortgage on a house, have a stable income, and have a clear path for where they're traveling in life. So that seems to me like they had more of pretty much everything that's fundamental to living a good life.
We have more opportunity.
Tell me more.
The digital age has created a generation of more millionaires amongst young people than we have seen in I don't know how many decades. I've only lived 2 of them. But there's tons of millionaires everywhere changing their lives with the opportunity that is the digital world. You've done it. I've done it. I'm nothing special. I don't know if you'd say that for yourself.
I'm definitely not anything special.
I'm nothing special. I tell people my entire standpoint is I did it so you can too. My grandma did it so you can too.
I agree. Look, there's a growing disparity that I've seen you talk about as well, where you either have 2 options. You're in poverty or in serial entrepreneurship.
Sure.
So there is
getting eradicated.
Totally. And you're either going to be up in the top class that managed to use social media for your good as a producer, or I think in the working class struggling who's using social media as a consumer. And I'd say consumption and production lead to very different outcomes in the modern world. If you're consuming more than you create, that's a pretty bad heuristic for living a fulfilled life. So I always encourage people
100%.
to try to produce more than they consume. And it's the same away from social media. You want to be giving more than you're receiving, more than you're taking from the world.
Yeah.
With that though, the grandparents thing, graduating at 21 without tens of thousands of pounds in debt, the way I see it, and the nuance I think you're forgetting to add, even though I see the direction you're traveling in, is we have suffered this abundance of comfort in some forms, but we have been, and we've been deprived, frankly, of deprivation. We don't have to hunt anymore like a caveman or whatever. Right. We don't have to be worried of war, fearful of war, at least on our home turf for the time being.
I don't know about that.
Well, that's another conversation, but I wouldn't say the
minds of the masses enough. See, this is interesting.
Yeah.
War is not a triviality. It's not far from your doorstep. If you weaken the minds of the masses enough, and once they're weak and you piss them off enough with enough polarized, politicized, younger than ever, you'll find plenty of 20-year-olds who turn up at the door and say, yeah, I'm willing to fight, because you've pissed them off enough and they're now willing to comply to a government they have no idea what the true agenda is behind. And this is why I'm super critical on the doom scrolling. People think this doom scrolling is just this pathetic sort of unimportant activity of not being able to get off your phone. No, it's an individual who can't say no. And when you can't say no, you will struggle in life because someone's going to come up knocking on your door from the top of society's hierarchy. And in order for you and your family to survive, you need to be able to stand firm and say no. This is why I speak about masculinity so much, because it's strong masculinity, competent masculinity that will be able to say no. Because when it's not about a verbal no, it's a physical no.
Yeah. To finish the point, if I may, the point I'm making is the deprivation that we have.
That was very sly.
It's the most basic necessity. So we might have Uber.
So it's like, this is kind of what I said near the beginning. It was very unclear when we're debating and when we're having a conversation. And that was within his power as the host. So if he wanted it... Oh, that's my light gone. Give me a sec. Right, back in business. If he wanted it to be a conversation it would be. But if I tried to debate, because up until then we'd been debating, then he's in that position to make me look like a fool for debating when he's trying to have a simple conversation. But then if I resort back to a conversational state where I sort of, you might consider me dropping my guard, so to speak, there were those pin me down, get you tactics played. So it was weird. After this, I stopped bothering. After that, I was like, okay, I'm not sure really what's happening here. Because that was a really important message that I put underneath all of this, which is that this pathetic, minuscule act of not being able to get off your phones and everything that comes underneath not being able to get on your phone. So that's consuming content 24/7, consuming opinions, and in doing so, failing to build your self-control so that you become a weak individual. What I elaborated on there was a description of a society who fails to take responsibility and who is politicized and polarized by the very thing that they're consuming. So I was essentially trying to put a point across of the importance of understanding the desperation an individual should feel to take accountability of how much they're on their phone because of the grave consequences of mass failure of not doing that. You weaken the minds of the masses, you make them compliant, and you politicize them with everything they're being wakened by. So it's the phones, the content, the opinions, the influencers, and they turn up for war. And he was saying how, oh no, war, war's not going to happen, as if it's this trivial thing. No, it's like what we're talking about could be the difference between us realizing we must not line up and go to war because it's not in our interest and saying no, or being shipped off to war to fight some bureaucrat's economic problem whilst they watch us from a boardroom. That's extremely important, and he's not 5, 6, 7 steps ahead thinking about this. It was a baseline conversation. Practically, his viewpoint in the whole thing was, this is terrible. It's been imposed on us by the older generations, and everyone's addicted to social media, and it's really bad. And I'm the delivery man of this message to let everyone know how bad it is, and we need someone to come across and put a ban or censor content or tell young girls that we're going to reduce the amount of influencers they're exposed to by penalizing those creators who built their platforms, regardless of how they've done that. So we at the core principally do not agree on the potential damages of allowing systemic intervention and how systemic intervention is allowed in the first place. Those are our main disagreements, and everything around it, as I said, was an ego off, which is fine. I'm glad we did the conversation. It was good, but watching it back it's very weird, and unlike most debates you see online, it was very
we might
unique
have
in a strange
sheen
way.
dresses that arrive on our doorstep. The deprivation that we have had, it's the most basic necessities. So we might have Uber Eats, we might have sheen dresses that arrive on our doorstep, handmade by some Chinese child. Like, it's all very surface level, superficial stuff that plays on our hedonistic desires. But the fundamental things that we don't want to be deprived of, we have been. Something like housing, having that deprived from us now, which we are, that's not good for personal development. Just like getting on the first rungs of a career ladder and getting job opportunities isn't good. It's not empowering. It's not one of these hard tasks that forces us to pucker up. If those opportunities aren't there for you, it's detrimental for a society. And the nuance that I haven't gone into before, like I've just said, we've been deprived of deprivation, we're too comfortable. And looking back at that, I think the nuance is that's true. We don't have to worry about many things, but the things we don't have to worry about, they fundamentally make us less powerful. They give us less meaning. So ironically enough, depression rates go down when societies face war. That's not me saying we need war, but the point is every single heuristic, and every heuristic for a flourishing society and one that gives people meaning. So having a house, having the ability to go and get a job when you're young, not leaving university with tens of thousands of pounds of debt, that's gone. So there's this duality where like we don't have the fundamentals that are actually important, and we've kind of redirected our attention, probably because of late stage capitalism, to the things that actually don't matter. So people will have the newest model of iPhone because they can't afford a house. They're like, this house is 9 times my annual salary, so I might as well. Pardon?
They were forced to get that iPhone?
Not necessarily.
I mean, the phone is
they will buy
thing these days, but
they will buy a new model of iPhone because they would look at a house being 9 times their annual salary and go, well, that's nowhere near what I'm going to be able to afford, so I might as well buy this more expensive thing. I'm not saying that's necessarily the right choice.
That's really difficult. So I'm going to buy myself a convenient thing that, as he said, late stage capitalism provides, so that I can fill my time up with entertainment, because I ultimately believe I can't achieve something on the either side of a list of things I don't really feel like doing because they're hard, is the point he just made.
I do not tell my audience they can't afford a house.
Yeah.
This is the difference between me and you.
Yeah. Look, anyone can try and work towards building a house, and I think anyone has the power within them to be able to afford a house. But we can't deny the fundamental reality that it's harder than ever. And
I said that in
that's
videos.
Yeah, and that's the fundamental point I want to make, is really teasing out this distinction of deprivation, where we need to redirect society's attention towards the fundamentals. I would rather What do you mean? How? From systemic levels? From government intervention helping young people? Do you think it's bad?
We will not agree here.
I think you also need to take personal responsibility, but there are limits. Who's more powerful, an individual or the rules imposed on them by government?
Oh, the individuals. We hold
more
the
powerful
governments up. Oh, yes.
Okay.
We hold the governments up. Your tax money keeps them in those offices. I'm not saying that governments inherently aim towards tyrannical regimes, but the core principle, which is that we are the ones putting those people in power and holding them up, is incontrovertible. We are much more powerful. This is the difference between me and you. That's the core disagreement. No bad, no good, just is. The core disagreement is that you prefer systemic intervention. My belief is that evil lives within us, that tyrants jump to opportunities to exploit people for their suffering, and the only way out is cumulative, collective, personal responsibility. Power to as many individuals as possible to put the phone down.
I still feel like we haven't gotten clarity on why Gen Z, with all of this imposed on them, are uniquely lazy. Maybe that's me missing something, but I want to know more about why we are uniquely a lazy generation.
I told you, because we've got less necessity.
But how does that lead to laziness? That doesn't necessarily follow.
Of course it does. If you don't need to cook, if you don't need to be strong, if you don't need to be fit, if you don't need to be mentally resilient, what do you end up doing? Scrolling, watching Netflix and ordering fast food. Sure, that's an extreme reductive example, but take it metaphorically.
Yeah, but I mean, I also look at our generation.
Would you not say those things are lazy?
I feel like
to do chronically. No, I'm not saying that ordering off a fast food delivery website is a lazy thing to do inherently, but if you're chronically subject to these habits, let's say, would you not say that's a lazy lifestyle?
I must be pedantic here, and forgive me for this, but how would you actually define laziness?
When you're asked if you live for scrolling, watching Netflix and eating fast food delivery services all day, every day, is that lazy? I don't understand what the denial is to say, yes, that's a lazy way to live. I don't get it.
I think that's really helpful for people to know.
A lackluster, lethargic attitude.
And see, notice there how I was, how I respected the desire to move on from the debate because we're now in this conversational dynamic. I didn't push back on the fact he diverted the question. I was just okay with going with where he wanted to go. This was weird.
To what should be actions aimed towards a more virtuous life.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not virtues to be subject to your lowest, most impulsive desires. That's a lackluster.
That's really helpful for and forgive me for this, but how would you actually like define laziness? I think that's really helpful for people to know.
A lackluster, lethargic attitude to what should be actions aimed towards a more virtuous life.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not virtues to be subject to your lowest, most impulsive desires. That's hedonism. That's why I said that in the video. Not because I'm an evil, horrible person who just wants to criticize everyone, but because that's the characteristic you end up embodying if you don't learn to say no.
Yeah. I look at our generation and look, there are so many snowflakes. There are so many victims that importantly don't move past the victim mentality. And I think everyone's a victim of certain things and you can't just cry about it. You have to take responsibility. You have to move forwards past that. So there's a difference between being a victim and having a victim mentality. And there are Gen Zers who are caught in this victim mentality where they're just wallowing in pain. And look, you're preaching to the crowd here about that. I spent 3 years with Trigonometry producing their podcast with Konstantin Kissin, whose career was highly elevated by...
So actually, just to add some thoughts here, what I've realized is underneath a lot of our debate was a disagreement in the percentages of those who are lazy snowflakes, as he described them, or however he said it, and those who are experiencing true suffering at home, are borderline suicidal, and are having all of this modern day crap thrown at them. And I would have liked to ask him, what does he think is the percentage between those two? What is the percentage of Gen Z, young people, whatever it is, who come from a stable background, have nice houses, have supportive parents, or at least one of them, have a reasonable income, have food on the table, a roof over their head, all of these basics. And what's the percentage of those who come from broken households, who are suicidal, and who are therefore such victims to all of these impositions, to the point where getting off their phone is so incredibly difficult? I reckon it's something like 5 to 10% in comparison to about 60%, with a rough amount in between. And so I'm hypercritical on the majority, and he's being empathetic towards a huge minority and using that as a representation for the entire generation and asking for systemic intervention for that low number. And the question needs to be asked, why is the attention on such a low number? Why is the focus on what they're victim to? Why is the focus on what's difficult? Why have I got a spider crawling across my table? Why is the focus on what they are victim to? Why is the focus on what is wrong with life and what's being imposed on them? And why are we not looking at that 60% who can just do better because they don't know true difficulty of life?
Him going to the Oxford Union and calling out young people to not be victims. Like I've been immersed in this for a good few years now, and I agree there are people like that. Oftentimes I think they get characterized as and mischaracterized as the prevalent force in Gen Z, when I think they're more of a awkward minority. You look at something like the employment crisis in the UK. There's this thing called NEET for any American viewers, not in employment, education or training. And we're about to hit 1 million young people 18 to 24 in the UK who are NEET. And you look at that, you go, well, they should just get a job. But it's not that easy. And where I'm going with this...
So why not create a job?
Is, look, they could be victims crying in their bedrooms saying it's not my fault.
Creating a job creates multiple jobs. You employ people.
They don't take action. That would make them have... Let me finish my point. That would make them have a victim mentality. And I do not support that. I think people who do that, who just doom scroll in bed and blame everything on others without taking action, are victims. They have a victim mentality and they're fucking pussies. Like, we'll agree on that. But
no, we don't agree on that. I never said fucking pussies. It's a strong phrase.
You look at the data of what's going on in Gen Z, 84% of people who are NEET, they want a job. They're actively taking steps to get jobs. Ooh. People are sending off 200 job applications to try and get a job with a degree. You yourself quoted the data that I think 30%, what I saw of university graduates in 2020 in a survey from the IFS, men and women earned a negative return on their degree. Like, it's crazy, it's tough. And what it shows is they're trying, but fundamentally the reward isn't matching up to.
I wouldn't say that going to uni qualifies as trying. Just because you go to university, it doesn't mean you're entitled to something on the end of it. You should go to university in full well knowing, especially because of how much it's discussed, that you could come out the other side of your university, and if you don't try hard, you cannot have what you wanted and what you would have wished for years beyond graduation. And so you have that choice to use those years to create an opportunity for yourself, using the power that you are as an individual human being with access to the entire globe through this social media and this technological revolution that he's describing throughout the entire podcast. Or you can use those few years to complain and to turn to the governments and ask the systems to fix the problems because it's so unfair and so difficult and so out of your reach. Choices, again, choices.
The input.
So you think they should be entitled to a job after they get a degree?
That's not what I'm saying.
No, I just asked the question. I didn't say that's what you said. No, so there's a decrease in what's available to you instantaneously according to the obvious choices in the system you've been pushed down.
And just quickly on the point of Gen Z being lazy as well.
I'll let you finish your point.
We're going to university longer than ever. We're working multiple jobs,
just cut me off, but it's all right. I just left it here. I thought, okay, just I don't know. I guess you wanted like clip moments or whatever. I'm not sure.
People haven't done before to stack incomes to be able to afford expensive cities. Yeah. When you look at the breakdown,
I think I just worked out. I think he wasn't interested in debating anymore. The debate was done. But that, I just realized that's not even how a conversation works anyway. If someone's talking, even if they're going to push back on what you say, you can't just not want to hear their opinion that disagrees with yours just because you want the conversation to go in a certain direction for your show. Like, it sort of defeats the purpose of having a guest on.
What Gen Z are actually going through. I think we're a uniquely lost generation rather than lazy. We're lacking clarity and direction rather than drive. That's the key distinction.
Could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because I've tried twice to make a point now and I keep losing it, but that's why I'll let you get to the end of your point. What happens, in your opinion, when you focus on what you are a victim to?
I think what you aim at is what you'll see. If you constantly see the problems without looking for solutions, you're going to get dragged down in the mud.
But what about if you're
going to have a victim mentality?
What about if your focus is predominantly on what you're a victim to, rather than what you're taking responsibility over? I'm not saying that people are not taking any responsibility. I think they're not taking enough responsibility. That's the difference. Mm-hmm. And when the victim mentality outweighs what they're taking responsibility, guess who you're championed by? That what you are a victim to.
Completely agree.
Right. So why not encourage people to take control of their life?
I am.
No, you're not.
I make
you're telling them
encouraging people to take control of their lives.
You told people that they have an addiction because the older generations made an algorithm. That's
also
the quote
true.
You made. You just told me you shouldn't be focusing on the victim mentality. Your instant response to Gen Z are scrolling on their phones too much was, oh, because the older generations created an algorithm.
Yeah, where
now
is the
you're
contradiction?
Telling me, don't interrupt me. Now you're telling me that you shouldn't be focusing on the victim mentality. Don't forget, this debate, this podcast, whatever this is, this conversation, the core disagreement was the response to doom scrolling. Your mentality was represented in those 5 seconds. Gen Z has a scrolling addiction. Gen Z don't get off their phones. The older people made an algorithm.
And also
that
take responsibility
is
for
a
actions.
representation. No,
that
is that.
What do you mean? No,
response.
You can't refute what I'm saying.
I didn't refute what you said.
You just said
the
no.
Instant response. The instant response was, yeah, and who made those algorithms? That is a representation of the mentality by which you live life.
Is it?
Of course it is. If it comes to your mind straight away, it means it lives in your subconscious. It means it's the first thing that comes to you instinctively.
So you're a mind reader as well now?
Just because I understand how the subconscious mind works, roughly, doesn't mean I'm a mind reader, nor am I claiming.
So you think that my predominant approach to life is being a victim and focusing on what's being imposed on me?
What's the reason for young people scrolling addictions?
I think they have had algorithms imposed on them.
There you go.
By older generations.
There we go. Victim mentality.
And because they need to take responsibility. They need to take the cards that they've been dealt and deal with them. Can you answer me, and please, like, I feel like we're struggling here to be direct and on point.
I'm very direct.
Yeah, well, let's answer this. Where is the contradiction in that statement that people have had algorithms imposed on them by older generations, been given phones at young ages, and that they need to take responsibility from here on out too, and do the best with the cards that they've been dealt?
I didn't say they contradict.
Okay.
I said that your primary focus, your instantaneous reaction was to look at what you're a victim to. It should be the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Get off your phones.
Okay.
Then we can observe who made the algorithms. And by the way, I would want to see who really made those algorithms. I mean, there's a lot of young guys in tech these days, but that doesn't matter. Let's say they are all 50, 60-year-olds plus. Then you need to look why those algorithms were made in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then you need to look, what is the goal of enslaving people to algorithms, to opinions, to shirking the responsibility of being able to think why underneath everything, until you get to the core problem, which is that the minds of the masses are actively being attempted to be taken under control to remove your power.
So why is that relevant? Why is that the core point?
Because we cannot turn to those same people who imposed the problem on us to give us a solution, because they don't. They give us a ban. They give us AI surveillance on our phone. They police narratives. They control narratives. And trust me, that's not for yours or my interest.
So
can you not agree on that? Don't divert. Do you not agree?
I completely agree.
Right.
So, but why is that relevant with your worldview of taking responsibility being more important when you've just listed everything that the older generations do and how corrupted they are?
Because if you don't take responsibility, you're powerless.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is in control of your life.
But why did you list everything else?
Why did I list everything else? Because you keep trying to get to that core point of the fact that we need someone to provide a solution for us. You want systemic intervention. You want social media bans. You said it earlier on.
So the role of other people and what their incentives are relevant.
What's that a reference to?
Well, it seems that you've been approaching this entire conversation.
I have never denied, for the 100th time, I have never denied what people are victims to. I'm trying to help you see that you've got an individual and you've got a problem creator and a fake solution provider.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot keep turning to those two. You turn to the individual.
But you've done that by analyzing the incentives.
Right, I accept victimhood. As I've done since the beginning of this show, I accept what people are victim to. But the instant response...
Yeah, and once you're aware of it, once you understand it, you toss it away. You're done with it. You don't need to know about it anymore. And you don't need to, like I said earlier, know who is behind every single thing that's wrong with your life. Social media is just one thing.
It has to be to take responsibility. You can't say, I can't get off my phone because this has been imposed on me. Or maybe you can, let's say once every 6 months. Maybe you fall short. Maybe you lose the battle in your mind. So, maybe you fail to say...
Okay, well, let's take this broader, because I think this is an unhelpful direction to go in. If we look at more than social media and screens, is it up to people to take personal responsibility?
Water.
Yeah, these are fucking shit. We're not retards, the cans are. Is it up to people to take personal responsibility to just be able to afford a house when they're 9 times their salary? Is it purely up to them to take responsibility as well? Is there nothing?
Who else
is there no lobbying they need to do of government policy? Is the government just
keep
completely irrelevant?
The main point. I don't know if you're actively trying to avoid
I'm genuinely
political
not.
discussion.
No, I'm
and
trying.
Elitist agendas.
You can fill me in. I'm just trying to get clarity on this. So away from social media, look at housing prices, at young people not having entry-level jobs.
Who's pulling the strings beyond the governments? Let's go there then.
I don't know.
World Economic Forum, BlackRock buying up all the houses. You know about that?
Tell me.
Well, they're buying up the houses. That's why the house prices are going up. That's why there's less available, because they're being bought up by elitist mega corporations who pull the strings behind the scenes that nobody knows about, whilst we argue amongst one another about whether or not we're entitled to a job after we get a degree. That's what I'm trying to understand. And your position is I'm trying to get help from these same people who are screwing up the market. And I'm telling you, you're not going to get help.
Not necessarily help.
By the way, in a utopianist world, in a utopia, I completely agree. How wonderful would it be that we have people who are in control of the systems and who have our best interest at heart? When has that ever been the case since the beginning of humankind?
Can I clarify one thing? I don't want to
ask you a question.
What's the question?
So you're not listening?
I am listening. When has it ever been different?
When has it ever been the case that those in power have our best interest at heart? That those who sit at the top of society's hierarchy actively attempt to take control of the housing market to help young people have better opportunities, an education system that actually trains them to think, not just consume and work, and a housing system that is, I'm not an economist, but somehow from systemically helped in a direction of let's make houses more available.
To answer your question, I don't know. I don't know when that hasn't been the case.
That's an important piece of awareness to have, because you're expecting a solution from those very people who screwed it up in the first place. That's one key point of awareness that is important. You can't not know that.
Important, but because you would know.
Can I make my point now that I let you make your point? Wait, can I make my point? I heard you out. I answered your question directly. When you say I want people to help us, who are the high up puppeteers, that's not necessarily what I'm saying. I'm just asking for us to rise up against things that are impacting us negatively and limit those negative things. Well, I think Gen Z are the revolutionary generation.
Sign me up. Oh, do you? Mate, we can't even get off our phones. Sign me up.
Gen Z's the revolutionary generation and we got scrolling addictions.
If there is one, I'm there for it.
Do you want to finish your point?
See that? Oh, mate, this is...
I made my point. Okay. I'm not drinking from this anymore. This is...
But yeah, I think the key thing there is it's not necessarily asking for help from potentially nefarious individuals or organizations. It's rather putting so much pressure on them that using their own nefarious incentives against them, they have to change course. There was an interesting case. I think it was
How might they do
year.
that? Don't move on. How might they do that?
What do you mean?
How might they do that? What you just said, they may have some special incentive to try and improve us for a false
I'll
good.
answer.
How might that look specifically?
Well, there was an interesting case this year where a young girl, I can't remember the name, I think it was censored because the case isn't finished, but she won a case, and there's a few follow-ups now, in California, Northern California, against Facebook because they impacted her life in a bad way. That's revolutionary. That's never been done.
That's very, very general. I would love to hear about this case. How Facebook impacted her life in a negative way. Not making any claims, don't know anything about it. But I really want to know if she took them to court for them being addictive and got a ton of money.
She won a case that they had harmed her unfairly and she got money from it. I think that's going to keep on happening.
So a system came to her aid.
And the thing is there was a recognition of these platforms being unjust, operating outside of the parameters of their duty.
So we should all take social media companies to court and get a ton of money so that we can buy the really expensive houses?
Due diligence of their responsibility as legal entities. I think, sadly, the only way to get these companies to listen is to threaten the only thing they care about, which is the top line. So if millions of Gen Zers or whoever, like it's not just Gen Z, it's all generations, impacted by social media, algorithms, whatever, they start suing, that's going to threaten companies to change their policy and actually take more care.
That's the end goal.
They won't be taking more care because they genuinely care about the people necessarily. It'll be because it threatens their profits. But you still get a positive result.
What's the end
for
goal?
young people.
How do those results look?
What
does enough won court cases achieve?
It means that they fundamentally have to change the way their algorithms work.
How?
A young girl doesn't get shown eating disorder content within 30 seconds of signing up to TikTok. Not necessarily policing content. I mean,
how
you should
else
censor more content for sure.
Censorship.
There's porn that gets shown on TikTok.
Oh, I agree.
And you would agree with that.
Except
on X. I think it's a shithole. It's
Except we disagree about who's actually in charge of these algorithms. Not the people whose business it was in the first place. Those who took ownership of it. So again, we come back to this core point, which is that you believe that there should be a ban of some form, a control of some form of online content, which is ultimately an infringement of freedom of speech.
No, that's not what freedom of speech is.
It will be a byproduct.
Not necessarily. That's a slippery slope argument.
Oh, no, that's what happens when you allow forces to get inside people's private lives.
So
instead of telling people you can get off your phone.
Okay, so censoring something...
Giving confidence to that girl from something of substance.
Okay.
Instead of telling her that someone in the algorithm can change the content that she has on her feed.
Does censoring eating disorders lend you to censor freedom of speech?
It puts power where it shouldn't be. That's the core problem. The power should be in the person behind the phone, not the one inside the phone. Has gambling been attacked? Casinos. They're on every corner of every street.
Yeah, they're evil.
The algorithms were based off the slots machine in the casinos. Each slot machine across the USA is culpable for $100,000 per year per machine. They base the social media algorithms off it. What's been done to fix gambling, to fix casinos, to encourage young men to not be subject to their lowest, most impulsive desires? And the only way you achieve that is by giving power to the person behind the phone so that they can work off the back of it.
Yeah. You have to give them power.
He doesn't get it. It's a cycle. He's got like a trap, because if I say who put the casinos there or who got young men into gambling, he would say, oh, it's the older generations. But then I would say that doesn't matter. And then we argue about whether it's important to be aware or not about who put those casinos in place. And then our argument is, and then the continuation of that argument is, right, I'm saying that the very people who put those casinos in place you're asking for help from now, and it was casinos once, it was gambling, it was slot machines, now it's scrolling. It's a never-ending cycle of people not realizing that it's nothing but continual exploitation of individual failure to take control of their lives, to have self-control in every moment of every day, from their tiny choices to the largest choices. Not seeing it. Doesn't see it.
You have to put things in place to give them power.
Not police what content appears on their phone. You tell them you can get off your phone. You don't have to watch that girl who shows you how an arse should look and how a body should look and what beauty means. You tell her to find beauty in life, to get off the phone because she doesn't have to watch that. She doesn't have to watch that. But if you tell her, don't worry, we'll come along and we'll change what appears on your screen, what you told her is you have to watch that and we're coming to save you. It's a broken message at the core.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mischaracterization of my message. I think you have to do both. You have to give them both. And the signs are hopeful. Like in 2022, social media usage peaked for Gen Z. We're actually the first generation that are getting off our phones faster than adults. And that's probably because we've been worse affected. So I hope we can all just get off of our phones, throw them in canals. Another thing that Jonathan Haidt speaks about is this collective action problem, where ultimately raising kids, for example, now the next generation of Gen Alpha coming up, they're going to ask for a phone, they're going to ask for social media, and the parents need to take responsibility and say, no, fuck off, wait until you're 18. But the kids come back and they go, yeah, but everyone else has it. Everyone else has social media. I'm going to be the only one that's not connected to the rest of my school if I don't have social media.
I can't think of a better thing to tell your child to be a black sheep.
Totally.
So why shouldn't they be the ones without social media?
They should
I was always taught that. I used to come home all the time as a clueless 14-year-old and say, Mum, they've all got this top, they're all doing this, they're all going to this party. So I don't give a shit what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe it's that you
and enough parents do that. You get enough black sheeps. Yeah. Enough people who are told to get off their phones.
Yeah, and then you overtake this collective action problem where a few rise up. You get this kind of rise of about 6% of people that's required to start a spiraling effect. And then more and more people get rid of their phones. Maybe it's just that I have a problem with your approach because I don't think it's realistic. Like, I think you are more of an anomaly than you would think, and you have more social agency than most people. I would say I'm
not
have that too, even if we're not necessarily special or unique.
That literally is a contradictory statement. I think you're an anomaly, and I think I am too, but that's not to say I think we're special. That makes zero sense. So he went back on the point we made earlier, which is that neither of us are special. He said he doom scrolls sometimes. I don't know his position on that, but I said I doom scroll sometimes, but I don't have an addiction. I can get off whenever I feel like it, and everyone else can too because I'm not special. Except now he's saying that I am special and he is special as well, and that it's unrealistic for other people to be able to do that.
It is important to actually look at how this gets solved on a pragmatic basis. And I agree, the parents should just tell their kids to fuck off, like, you're not getting social media.
What's not pragmatic about telling someone that they can lock their phone and put it down? Fuck me.
But the reality is, whilst everyone has access to it, and that's the only form of social connection, when others aren't going outside and playing, en masse, people are still going to get social media, and that's the way they're going to connect. I wish it was as simple as the way you're proposing. I just think it's more nuanced than that.
We've got a social media ban coming.
Yeah,
You know about
literally.
that?
So,
Under
so
16.
action is being taken.
I don't agree with it. I don't believe that they have young teenagers' interest at heart. They don't.
No, I agree.
He agrees that a social media ban is... Oh, my days, bruv.
And this is the problem. That came about because there was enough complaining from parents, from young people, from schools, from teachers, because they didn't give power to young people, because the message is you're a victim, you can't do anything about it. All these addictive impositions were thrown at you and you're just subject to it. So
And
enough
this is
people
what-
complained, and along came the savior and they gave you a social media ban.
Which benefits them and not the people
No, it doesn't.
necessarily.
No, it does not.
I'm saying which benefits people higher up rather than the people. So I agree with you. And it's a shame
because
that
it's an
something
impingement of freedom of speech.
that's what they're using it as, and I disagree with that.
Exactly.
So that's why it's so tough, and that's why the nuance is difficult on this, because with government intervention comes the potential for nefarious individuals to
As it has done since the
policy.
beginning of time. And you keep looking to those people for a solution.
Not necessarily a solution.
do.
I just think you need more pressure where people give a direct thing, an action that needs to be taken. And that's what I'm going to be doing over the coming months. I'm building kind of a manifesto for young people and what would actually help us. And it needs to be directly on point and limit the ability to be coerced and manipulated and molded in.
And hopefully involved in that manifesto is an instruction to put your phone away and find something better, presumably.
Into what fits these people at the top's agendas. So I think it's tough, and there's a long road ahead, and people need to take responsibility, do the best with the cards that they've been dealt. But I also think what I'm going to be approaching, as well as keeping on that messaging, championing Jordan Peterson's teachings, and it's so sad that he's now ill and can't fucking be out there like helping people more. So you get retards like Clavicular instead emerging. I'm going to be championing.
Why are they emerging? Because everybody's watching him. And that's why I come along and tell people to get off your phones and stop watching them. Not because Jordan Peterson's not out there. Not because there isn't enough awareness about the damages of social media. Everybody knows how damaging social media is. But because people aren't being criticized enough, harshly, aggressively, to get off their phones and stop watching fools smash their bones on their faces. Literally my entire point that he told me after 20 minutes is not my entire point. He literally, this conversation is super weird to watch back. Very strange. Lots of agreement, lots of fake disagreement, and not much disagreement except the systemic intervention thing, where he basically only had to say that he agrees with me to save face. But what he's advocating for the entire way through is some form of a ban, some form of content censorship, which will inevitably result in the infringement of freedom of speech, in control of online narratives, which will be in alignment with furthering this powerless, weak, compliant society that we can see unfolding before us since way before Gen Z even existed.
His messaging, but then also trying to go further and build up mass consensus for us to get bigger change. That's my approach. And I'm grateful to have you on the show with your perspective on this. And I genuinely think it will help a lot of people. You have a following, and I'm sure based on the work you've done, your course, your book, you have changed a lot of lives. And for that, I say thank you. Thank you for helping, especially young people, in a time where it is tougher than ever. I guess we can end with this. What's been the biggest takeaway for you from this conversation?
Takeaway. I think more than ever before, it's important for conversation with your adversaries. And because you find that although you disagree, there are subtle perception changes that can be made based off the things you agree on. And those things you agree on, especially on social media, tend to be muddied and lost down a chasm of disagreements, because disagreement and stimulation and extremity is what sells, because that's what stimulates the minds of the now grey, once green consumer masses. So my take from today is to never ever drink from this can of water again, because the table is soaked. And the other part is I will never, ever overhaul the power of personal responsibility with some form of external reliance. For me, there is no nuance. There is no in-between. There is acceptance of what you're a victim to. It's been like that since the beginning of life. Life is tough. Life's only going to get harder. AI is just down the pipeline. So the focus needs to be not on what you're a victim to, but on what you need to do with what's given to you. Not because just doing your bed today is going to overhaul the powers that be who are imposing the social media algorithms. But if enough people champion their minds and their day-to-day lives with all of their habits, eventually you find that the systems that are imposing these things on us collapse because they lose the demand, they lose the consumers. And that's the core message we sort of glossed over throughout the conversation because it got heated. It isn't about doing your bed beats the social media algorithms. It's a collective effort to be in control of your day. Personal responsibility doesn't mean just try harder and resist what's given to you. Personal responsibility means that the message of I can echoes through your ears day in, day out, no matter what's come to you. And eventually you're not subject to what's imposed to you because you simply don't invest energy into it. I consume social media here and there, but nobody's in charge of me. If they removed it tomorrow, my life would be completely fine. I'm not addicted. I wouldn't have, oh, this is such an obvious word that's not coming to mind. What is it when you have, when an addict has withdrawal symptoms?
Withdrawals, yeah.
You're not going to have withdrawals. I wouldn't have withdrawal symptoms if I were to come off social media. And you become a person when you do this and you live like this day in, day out, to all these things we've discussed, to the hypersexualized culture, to the social media, to the scrolling habits, to the fast food delivery services, to the available Netflix to watch from today until tomorrow. And you become a person who embodies no as a message and as a defiance to what prospers only because we continue to say yes. We hold up the politicians. We hold up the systems that are screwing us over because of our investment, because we consume, because there's a demand. You remove the demand by giving the power to the people, to the individual at the beginning, and then to the collective masses. Powerful or powerless, one or the other.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is that I don't disagree with what you say. There's not like a fundamental disagreement necessarily, at least in most things we talk about. It's that I just think I have other things I stack on top as well that need to be considered. And I would say a couple of years ago when I started podcasting and started creating content, I was more in line with your style of thinking, and I would put all the emphasis on responsibility, taking action, and I would not make any less content of that now. I would just also add bigger societal, cultural questions to that.
To increase awareness.
To increase awareness, put pressure on institutions, and you'll disagree with me on that, but that's fine.
That's not adding, that's changing. What's this? That's not adding, that's changing. You cannot ask for aid from institutions additionally to taking personal responsibility. Either you are responsible for what you're doing in your day, or you're asking to give away that responsibility, in which case you are not responsible. It's being shared, which means you're not the head of your choices. You're not in charge of your life.
That was my biggest takeaway, is the agreement with
But anyway,
responsibility, and how I just think there are other things stacked on top of it. And look, like I'm 21 and I've not had a lot of time to be experienced in the world and know the depths of responsibility, the ins and outs of where someone has to take responsibility versus when someone doesn't. That said, I have been working for the last 7 years, more hours than a full-time job, probably double every week. I've traveled to 33 countries. I've met like some of the most idealized intellectuals in the world. And that's not to fucking brag, because like, who gives a fuck?
Oh, of course.
But
sounds like a great life though. I wonder how he achieved it. My message is that everything I've achieved, all of my audience can too. So there's another thing we disagree on there. I should have actually asked him that. How did he achieve that? And would he say that someone else can't achieve it?
I've had a lot of life experience, especially on the traveling front, I think, more than anything, just meeting, like, it's crazy how many people we get to meet in this space, doing podcasts and going and getting guests for your podcast. Like, I was reflecting on my trip to America when I was there for 3 months. I was like, I've probably fucking met and spoken to more people in the last 3 months than like a lot of people would do in their lives back in the day when they were limited. And with that experience that I have had, I just think there are limitations to telling someone to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I think it's fucking helpful. I don't think I ultimately think what you aim at is what you see. So
and what
you should
practice is what you get.
Yes. So you need to practice things that actually move you forward rather than intruding into this fucking inner citadel where you criticize everything and you say it's not your fault. I just think on a practical level, the way that bears out from having Gen Z employees too that have quietly quit on me, where they just do the bare minimum until you kind of have no choice but to fire them. Like, I see how this bears out. I've tried relentlessly with friends very close to me, like loved ones, with one approach of messaging. I think it works for people and lights a fire up someone's ass like ours, where we kind of already had that proclivity. Whereas people who are genuinely down in the trenches, fucked over by mass prescription of antidepressants and SSRIs that chemically castrate you and poison you, and then marketed.
He would be absolutely shocked to hear the amount of people that have messaged me telling me that before they used to watch my content, they were on medication, on antidepressants and suicidal and the rest of it. Thousands and thousands of messages, which is axiomatically only a percentage of the total amount of people. So his implication suggesting that my, light a fire in people's butts so that they can try harder and be motivated because they already have that proclivity is just false. There are countless, not just a tiny percentage or a set of anomalies, countless people, tens of thousands who've watched my videos from the bottom of the bottom. How did he describe it? From the trenches, who just through implementing my advice, just through implementing categorical, unequivocal personal responsibility over every single action's total disregard of what they've been victim to, not resorting to a lone wolf state where they reject any human aid, but understanding that nobody's coming to save them because they are subject to life, and the power and speed at which you can advance is totally down to how much focus you're placing on your next action. And if you are reducing that even by 1 or 2% of this awareness and of what you're victim to that he's describing, it slows you down and it weakens you. So it's just not as powerful of a message. You need my message to get out of a suicidal state.
And then marketed. I saw that like 10%.
And it isn't my message, some sort of magic woo-woo that I've come up, some sort of golden undiscovered wisdom, studied by many, many, many people before me and countless others across society.
Of all marketing budgets online are pharmaceuticals that, like, I don't want to get assassinated, but like pharmaceuticals, very questionable. SSRIs literally poison you. For those people that have been targeted by mental health awareness that tells you have depression and then medicates you that you have a chemical imbalance, but then gives you a chemical imbalance from the meds they give you. Those people, they need a little bit more than just like pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps is a very reductive way of describing what personal responsibility completely entices.
I agree with you on the whole, but it's cool to tease this out. I think this is super productive, especially for everyone listening as well. Like this, I just see it as layers. Like these conversations just add layers and strings to our bow. They help us refine our worldviews and ultimately make better content for people. And I don't see many fucking older people doing conversations like this and actually teasing out opinions. So I appreciate your time. Where can people find more of your work?
TikTok, Instagram for more content.
I think that's it.
Real, but hold up. In the
Book, it's think through and help, and we agree.
Yeah, I just say make looking towards kind of other things imposed on you. But yeah, 5-star on all audio platforms, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
That's it. An interesting experience. I still think that doom scrolling on your phone for hours and asking the social media companies to censor content and push for a ban is a mentality that leads your life in a direction of lazy hedonism. That doesn't mean everybody who scrolls social media is a lazy hedonist. It also doesn't mean that I believe all young people at the moment are lazier than previous generations. They're just encouraged in their complaining and not told enough that life gets way, way, way harder than having to put your phone down and not having the job availabilities that you'd like after leaving uni. Way harder. If you want to make money, you can. If you want to save up and travel the world, you can. If you want to build a family and live a happy life, you can. And you simply need to implement more advice from people who tell you that you can than from those who place their hand on your shoulder and say that they understand you, how it's difficult. Thank you for watching, guys. And I'll see you on Friday for 5 p.m. for another interesting episode.